Hi, this is a continuation of my reading my essay on the practice of contemplation, which was interrupted because the battery died on my computer. And as I was saying, that just commenting on the last paragraph that I read, that now people tend to always want a this worldly, positive, optimistic view of things, and don't want renunciation or you're giving up of things or any denying the validity of or importance of this world. But in fact, that's not at all the case. Besides the huge amount of suffering of billions of humans and non-humans that you can observe all around you, if you have any experience of touching the one itself, you realize that being here in this world at all is the most horrible thing. And there's only thing that you want to do in comparison is just return totally to the one. So anybody who's pro this world can't really have experienced what alternative there is. And further, if you know what else there is, you would know that the that this is really, though it seems so important to us as being the what we're stuck in and what we know, this is actually the least real, least important aspect of reality. This lower level, the one and well, nous and then the one are much more real and much more of most of what reality really is. So anyway, now we'll go then on to the next paragraph here. This then is the situation and reality in which we presently find ourselves, and the obvious task is to reverse the whole process, escape totally from space and time and multiplicity and individuality, and even from eternity and infinity and totality, and return to just being the one. This is the path of contemplation. In understanding this process and path, it is important to note that the nature of the individual soul is to love, and it is where and is what it loves. While the soul's true love is only for its source, the one, to which it really longs to return, in its present fallen condition this has been forgotten, and its love has been altogether turned around and misdirected through nescience to the things of this world and itself, pursuing which its misdirected love becomes all the more misdirected, and it ties its bonds tighter and tighter in a vicious cycle of ever-increasing nescience. Of the essence of the path, then, and continuing throughout it, is the continuous effort to give up all love for all the things of this world and the individual self, and to redirect all the soul's love back exclusively towards the good, the absolute. True renunciation and true knowledge go hand in hand together. This, incidentally, is why the Socrates of the Symposium, who represents the higher divine part of the soul, states that he says that he knows nothing other than the things of love. And the Stephanus numbers for anyone who wants to look that up in the Symposium, it's 177d, 7 to 8. It is also important to note that the soul, as stated above, a sort of microcosm of the whole system of reality, never really entirely descends, but part of it, however much it may be forgotten by the lower part we are mostly exclusively aware of, remains always above in the higher realities. And it is through this higher part that we need to pull ourselves back up. And also it needs to be remembered that everything is really spirit, mind, or contemplation, and that discursive thinking and physical action, physical in quotes, are really lower, weaker forms of contemplation, even though they appear to us in our delusion to be dealing with and attempting to manipulate an objective, external, and physical or mental, in the lowest psychological sense of the word, object world. Actions and thoughts directed towards things in this world really aim at creating a state where different things will appear to us, which is really an altered state of contemplation. The practice of contemplation then may be roughly outlined in 3 stages corresponding to the 3 levels of reality or modes of being. It should be noted, however, that actual practice is iterative and non-linear, and the 3 levels constantly interact with and reinforce each other throughout the path. Also, this brief outline essay will not discuss all of the practical details and the many difficulties, troubles, hindrances, pains, and pitfalls that occur through the course of spiritual contemplative practice. It may be noted, however, that tremendous perseverance, effort, patience, endurance, and discernment are required. It's not the easy thing that many people nowadays imagine they can do in their spare time while they're pursuing their worldly desires. The first stage involves alteration of discursive thinking and phenomenal behavior. The practitioner must first gain a good understanding of the principles of the path and the nature of reality, as outlined above, and of the unsatisfactory nature of worldly life and repeated rebirth. He must stop thinking like a worldling and start thinking as a renunciant, always thinking of how things are and of getting free, always seeing things in terms of universal principles, not particular occurrences, as much as possible not thinking of worldly matters and desires beyond what is necessary, trying to gain greater understanding in thought and emotion, turning his concern and love away from all the things of this world and towards the divine mind thought and the absolute, and so forth, such practices. This is done through reading, study, and reflection with continuous effort. Ideally, it is, of course, good also to have the association of teaching of and discussion with other more advanced or at least equal renunciants and contemplatives. But unfortunately, in this dark age, such are hardly to be found, so that the sincere aspirant is basically left on his own with the writings of the ancients as his only guides. That may be a difficult thing, but it's important to note that. The practitioner must also indeed renounce all worldly activities, pursuits, and desires as much as possible, and devote all his time and energy beyond what is necessary for psychophysical survival to contemplation and study. This includes celibacy, vegetarianism, teetotaling, that is, complete abstention from alcohol and intoxicants, abstention from entertainments and social events, complete honesty, kindness and non-harming, etc. The cultivation of all moral and ascetic virtue. All this may seem like only necessary preparatory requirements for contemplation, but since, as stated above, all is really contemplation, and to know is to be, these practices of thinking and conduct are, in fact, a sort of low-level contemplation, and by changing one's thinking and actions and way of life and attitude, one has already, to a certain preliminary degree, brought about a change in one's contemplative state and mode of being. The next 2 stages comprise what may appear as more the contemplation practice proper. The second stage is the ascent to and contemplation of and ultimately union with the divine mind thought. This stage itself consists of 2 parts. The first part is the ascent to the noetic realm from the things here, and the second part, the quote, dialectic proper, is the sustained contemplation of and absorption into or transfer to this realm after the initial access to it has been gained. The first part is basically the one part of the path where the question of different methods of proceeding arises. The dialogues, that is the Platonic dialogues, give a number of different methods for making the initial ascent to the noetic realm through either the variety of different forms or through working to gain the vision of one particular form. The Phaedo, which we mentioned earlier, gives the direct method of at once shifting the soul from all preoccupations with individual sense data in the space-time realm to the ideas which they reflect while sitting in formal contemplation, and as each occasion for discrimination arises in the seeming space-time flow. The Symposium gives the method of access through contemplation of the specific form of beauty. The Republic presents the method of ascent through contemplation of the mathematical type forms, and etc. The basic principle and procedure underlying all these methods is, however, the same. Starting with multiple reflections of either one specific form or of a group of related forms, or of many forms as the occasion for each arises, one must continually abstract the universal element in each more and more, ignoring the multiple things per se, and concentrating just on that universal, non-sense perceptible element, until the direct apprehension of the idea, with a capital I, in itself dawns upon one. When, after long, hard practice and impelled by growing love for the divine beauties one is now beginning to glimpse, and by corresponding growing disgust for the sense world, one has attained at least a degree of direct apprehension of at least some of the ideas, and can fairly regularly and consistently direct one's attention to them and bring them into view, one can then proceed to the second part, the actual contemplation proper of the divine mind thought. This second part of the second stage is, as stated, where the practitioner directly and deeply contemplates and is in direct contact with the divine mind thought. This is the famed dialectic, which, contrary to popular belief, has nothing to do with discussion between people or discursive or professorial thinking or anything like that you would find in academia. In the dialectic, in quotes, the dialogue, in quotes, is between the noetic part of the soul and the divine mind thought. Entering into the noetic realm, apprehending the forms and their relations by directly receiving them from the divine mind thought, exploring all the structure and wonders there and being drawn in by their ravishing beauty, identifying with the divine thought more and more, the divine mind thought more and more, and attenuating oneself more and more. The summit of this stage is reached when the awareness and experience of the soul has entirely entrusted itself to and passed over into the awareness and experience of the divine mind thought in itself, timelessly yet actively resting in itself. Within this awareness, it receives truer knowledge about itself and knows that this is not the end, but that it must, and its love is impelling it to press further to the one itself. Incidentally, it may be noted that when this stage is accomplished to some degree, the practitioner now has a degree of direct access to knowledge and the forms themselves, and can directly see, in quotes, the ideas of, quote, contemplative asceticism in itself, quote, spiritual teaching in itself, quote, righteousness in itself, etc. And to the extent that he can see them clearly and follow them, despite his remaining bondage, habit patterns, ignorance, etc., now has direct guidance from the forms in the divine mind thought, independently of any instruction appearing in the least real sense world, and including any authoritative things from tradition. Established to some degree here, one may pass on to the third and final stage of directly apprehending, approaching, and reuniting with the good or the one. There is not so much that can be really said of method for this stage. understanding now in some way where the one must lie, and with great longing gazing steadily in that direction, being carried out by the surge of the effulgence and love of the divine mind thought. Suddenly, after a long time, the one appears and manifesting itself gives a glimpse to the contemplator. Now, knowing to at least a small degree where and what it is, one keeps looking with tremendous long and protracted effort. The one keeps revealing itself more and more, deeper and deeper, clearer and clearer, with quantum increases followed by painful returns of darkness. When the one is manifesting, the soul feels now an almost unbearable love, wanting only to totally be absorbed and obliterate itself in it. Over a long time, the vision becomes clearer and steadier, the more one can give up attachment to everything else, and the soul begins to realize its own nothingness in this contemplation. That really the one itself is the source of its own awareness and experience, and that really contemplation of the one can only ultimately be the one contemplating, in a sense, itself. The soul's great love is an incomplete reflection of the autonomous unity of the one in its hyper-goodness. Continuing more and more, the one manifests itself more and more fully, and the soul passes over more and more into the one, and is more and more attenuated as itself. When the one is fully and completely manifested, then that is all there is. No more soul, no more world, no more time and space, no more even eternity and infinity and the divine mind thought. Endless hypersentience beyond sentience, hyper-oneness beyond oneness, hyper-goodness beyond goodness, hyper-perfection beyond perfection. When this is all there is, this one only and fully, and everything else whatsoever has totally ended completely forever, this is release from birth and death, and the end of the journey. Thank you very much.